What's up, y'all? So I want to explain a pretty simple concept. It's a really simple concept, actually. It's basically how money creation, is like almost robbery, because in the economy, and I have this whiteboard, and I was trying to think of how to illustrate this, but it's out of my. Maybe I'll come up with something and we'll go there. But in the economy, you have this planet rich with resource, okay, and then there's also human resource, skilled labor, everything. People work and they produce, okay? They take things from the planet, turn it into something useful, or maybe they even just work, and give themselves as resource. And, they trade with one another. That's what the economy is. It's trading what you have for what somebody else has. And then money, kind of came along somewhere, and people started trading the resource for this intermediary, good basically, to trade it for the other thing. So instead of going directly to each other, they traded for money. And then somewhere along the line, people realized that money was a very valuable thing, and they kind of started taking advantage of that. And the first money, if I'm not mistaken, was like gold. It was a natural thing, that people started to value and use as like an intermediary good for the transactions. Then somewhere along the line, banking came around. They started doing this thing called fractional reserve banking, and they basically started giving everybody banknotes when they brought their gold to the banks. And they said that this banknote, which was just a piece of paper, could be redeemed for that gold, or that gold could be redeemed with that piece of paper. And people just started trading with these banknotes, the paper, and they basically started saying that these banknotes were worth gold. Okay, so that started to become money. People just traded with those banknotes that said you could, redeem the gold with this little receipt, basically. And when people started doing that, the banks realized, like, look, man, like, we could basically just create these. And, the bank's business model is to, take people's deposits, give them, some type of interest, for letting them hold on to that money, that gold or whatever. And then they'll loan out that gold and charge like a little bit of a higher interest rate. So like maybe 4% to who they loan out to. They might pay like 3% or 2% to whoever deposited that. That's the original business model for banking. You see what I'm saying? And then when these banknotes came out and everybody started using these as money, the banks were like, hey, like, we don't actually have to give out any of this physical gold. We don't even have to take that risk. And they said they could just literally create more of these banknotes, right? Redeemable, or gold is redeemable with this receipt, whatever, and give those out as loans because people were trading with this. This was money, right? At the time. And then a big scam ensued where, a whole bunch of money or these banknotes were created. And, so maybe there's like, a billion freaking banknotes that say they could be you could redeem an ounce of gold, each, you know what I mean? But maybe there's only 1 million ounces of gold. So, eventually there's a lot more of these banknotes that said you could redeem gold with them than there was actual gold. And they called that fractional reserve banking. They said that there's a fraction in reserves of what these banknotes represent. And that's basically fraud, straight up, okay? But that's not even the point. That's how we get to the point. That's the process through which this type of thievery, you might say, has occurred. So when a bank gives out one of these banknotes to somebody as a loan, that person will then spend it in the economy, trade somebody for their resource, either natural resource or their labor or something. They'll trade it for that resource, even though the bank just literally created a piece of paper. Like, boom, here's a piece of paper, trade it for something real. You know what I mean? And eventually this person's supposed to pay that back, and they might eventually. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they default on those. They borrow this money, buy some real stuff with it, and then don't pay the bank back, and he's going to bankruptcy, whatever. But they still bought real stuff with it, did they not? You know, it could be something they consumed, or it could be just property. If it's property, then the bank usually has a deal with the people that borrow the money to seize that property and then auction it off to try to get that money back. So the banks are supposed to balance their books. Whenever they create these bank notes as loans, and it goes into the economy, it's spent on something, you know, traded for some type of resource, it eventually is supposed to be paid back, so the books will be balanced. You see what I'm saying? So it's an outstanding loan. It has to be back, you know, go back down to zero. And the whole monetary system at the moment is made up of outstanding loans. You know, there's a meme that I saw that somebody said, like, the whole world is like $200 trillion in debt, and people are like, to who? You know, how is the whole world $200 trillion in debt? Like, it's because these banks are fraudulently making money, creating money, and it's you know, outstanding debt. That's what the whole monetary system is. So anyway, back to the point. Banks are creating these loans, banknotes. People are borrowing that. You know, the bank creates it right on the spot with fractional reserve banking, gives it to somebody. That person trades it for some type of resource, okay? So they're trading paper, or it used to be paper, now it's just digital. Well, and that's basically the same thing. But actually digital has the the potential to be like totally abused, because they could just like digits on digits on digits, you know, digitally. But these banknotes are created on the spot, given to somebody. That person trades it for resource, okay? So they're just making money, creating money, giving it to somebody. They're trading it for resource, and they can default on that loan, whatever. Like I said, there's a whole process. If they default, then the bank seizes the property, auctions it off, whatever, okay? But as it stands right now, there's an outstanding debt, you know, that exists, which even allows it to be a monetary system. Because at this point today, the entire, like every single, you know, type of money in the world basically is this type of bank created money. You see what I'm saying? So the only reason we have currencies is because there's a lot of outstanding debt. And if all that debt's paid back, there's no money. You see what I'm saying? So there has to constantly be more money created than there is being paid back. So it's a perpetual thing. And the bank's making money off this. They're charging interest and getting, you know, those interest payments with every single loan that they put out. So there's not only, you know, the need to have outstanding debt for there to even be a monetary system, but there's debt accruing on top of that in the form of interest owed, which can't be paid back because the money doesn't exist, because the only money that exists is the borrowed money, and for you to pay the interest, there has to be more borrowed money created, and which will have more interest. You know, it's impossible. It's a scam. It's a big old scam. But the point is, the money's created, people spend it on resource, real resource, okay? And then these people that traded that resource for that banknote will trade it to somebody else, so on and so forth. Eventually, it's supposed to get paid back, but it's like this constant, perpetual thing. So we could even have a monetary system, whatever. As that money comes in and goes from the person, you know, the hand of the person who borrowed it initially, to the person who traded some type of resource for it, to the next person who traded some type of resource for it, it trickles into the economy and adds to the supply of money, okay? When it adds to the supply of money, it diminishes money's value. It's a supply and demand function. The more there is of a supply versus the demand that exists for it, you know, there would be a diminishing value. That's just supply and demand, okay? So as more money comes in, it diminishes the value of the already existing money. And it kind of happens in a kind of easy way. You know, when this person borrows this money and they go to this person to buy whatever resource it is, they compete with other people that are trying to buy that too, and they'll outcompete them, which basically is an offer. It's like a bid to buy whatever this person is offering, and they'll just bid higher, which will make the price of whatever this person is selling higher just by bidding higher. You see what I'm saying? And then this guy who has that money now is going to add to the competition for the next good that he's trying to get. You know, other people trying to get it. they will add to that competition, make a higher bid, the price of that's higher, and then the next one, and so overall you'll get these higher bids, higher offers, higher prices. That's what it is. So that's kind of how inflation actually works, step by step. It kind of is like I call it like trickle down inflation. I don't know, heard about old trickle down economics. It's an irrelevant concept to me, but it's kind of like trickle down inflation. So the money trickles into the economy, and really the people who get their hands on the money first, who borrow it initially, they get to take that money and buy this resource while the price is still low. The more money that comes in, the more that trickles in, the higher the price of this, the higher price of the next thing. And whenever the money's all the way down at the bottom, somebody tries to buy something, the price is already bid up higher. So the price is already higher. It's a bad situation for the people at the bottom. The fresher the money is out of the printing press, the lower the prices probably are, and the better deals you can get for that money. You see what I'm saying? And so that's a whole system that exists with money creation, perpetual debt, outstanding debt. That's how we even have monetary systems today. And I guess there's a lot of points here, so the inflation, you see how that works. You see how the people who are the borrowers, who get the money fresh out the printing press, benefit the most because they can get stuff at a cheaper price before prices are inflated. They're higher up in that food chain, you might say. So with that, you can see how that goes. And another thing, and here's really like the big kicker, and this is like the main thing, and we're gonna explain this. It's like it goes full circle, kind of. If you borrow money, let's say you borrow $1 billion, okay? That sounds like a lot of money, while prices are at a certain point. If money keeps coming in, the money's devalued, you know what I mean? If prices keep inflating, then later on, $1 billion isn't a lot of money. So you borrowed $1 billion, that's an outstanding debt. You have to keep up with interest payments, whatever, so you don't, get property seized or whatever, so you don't default on the loan. But if you borrow that money, then the money devalues after more and more money keeps coming in. Later on, what seemed like a lot of money, $1 billion loan or something like that, put it this way, you could get $1 billion right now, buy a whole lot of stuff. Later on, if that money devalues, you can only buy a little bit of stuff. And therefore, you really only need to trade a little bit of stuff to get that $1 billion back to pay back that loan. This is an important concept here. This is kind of really what I was trying to point out. So, you borrow money, okay, you got that access, the bank's just creating it, and then you trade that for resource. You could trade it for a lot of resource early on. You see what I'm saying? Later on, as more and more money comes in, the first guy could trade it for a lot of resource, the next guy could trade for, almost as much, the next guy almost as much as that. Later on, you can only trade it for so much because the money's worthless and the prices are really high. You have to trade a lot of money for a little bit of goods. You see what I'm saying? And eventually, it gets to the point where you can actually pay back that $1 billion that you bought a lot of resource for. You could pay it back by only trading a little bit of resource for it to get that $1 billion loan back or whatever. And that's the big scam, because inflation benefits borrowers. If you're a person who just like is down here in the economy working, trading resource for this money that's basically being fraudulently created, if you're trading your resource for that and you're holding on to this money and they keep printing it, like it used to be able to buy a whole lot of stuff, okay? They keep printing it, the supply increases, the value of the freaking money decreases, so basically you can buy less stuff with it. So if you're sitting there holding that money, being like an honest person, working, trading resource, while these people are just printing more of it, they're deflating the value of your money. So inflation benefits borrowers, okay? And it hurts, honest people who are like saving money, for instance, because the value of that money is just diminishing. It's just literally disappearing, okay? This happens on an entire scale with entire currencies. Literally an entire currency will be created, and initially you could buy a lot of stuff. Like I said, people borrow, buy that stuff, okay, and the next guy could buy a little bit less, next guy a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, and they keep just inflating the currency, creating it until it gets worthless, until literally it's kind of like it was in Zimbabwe. They had to bring wheelbarrows of money, literal freaking like piles of cash to buy like a loaf of bread. Okay, so it's like literally, so if you took out a loan early on, you could buy like a whole freaking building, with the amount of money that's in that wheelbarrow. Later on, after the inflation occurs, you can only buy a loaf of bread. Okay, and the converse is true too. To get $1 billion, you had to sell a building. Later on, you only had to sell a loaf of bread. You got to understand money. It's both ways. So the point is, they'll do this whole thing with entire currencies. They will literally inflate a currency to oblivion till it's worthless. They'll just borrow. They'll create the money. People will borrow it, and the people who are on the front lines benefit the most because they could buy. The money's just created. People buy a lot of resource. Later on, they only have to trade a little bit of resource to get that money back and pay back that loan, because eventually the money's worthless. Okay. And this is what they do with entire currencies. Eventually, certain currencies just turn to nothing, and they just say, oh, well, let's just totally discard the whole currency. That's after they literally robbed people of all of the resource. They went, hey, new money created, buy a whole bunch of resource over and over and over and over until it became worthless. And those people who borrowed initially bought all this resource and have all this resource, okay? Later on, when the money's worthless, all they got to trade is a little piece of that, get all that money back, and they can pay back a whole freaking crazy loan. It's robbery, dude. It's robbery. Money creation allows that type of robbery, dude. People need to understand this. This is such a relevant concept. That's basically what I'm trying to explain. And they'll do this over and over, and they don't talk about it. They just do it. They're just robbing people, not talking about it. Like a lot of people talk about the national debt in the United States. Right now it's like 26 trillion, okay? A lot of people are like, how are we going to pay that back? You're thinking, how are we going to pay that back at the current value? When the value of money is inflated so high that you only have to trade a loaf of bread, a little piece of resource to get $1 trillion back. You got to trade what, like 26 loaves of bread to get pay back that debt? That's nothing. What's really valuable in the economy is the resource. The resource is valuable. There is limited resource on planet Earth. And the human resource keeps kind of increasing because we're adding to the population. There's skilled labor. There's all types of different resources, right? The resource matters. The money is this arbitrary thing that is created, and it's used to rob people of resource, dude. It is used to rob people of resource. Such a relevant concept, dude. Such a relevant concept. And to be honest, I think that's all you need to know about that, man. We can go on and talk about it, but I think I covered the basics. And I don't want to run this on too long. I just want this to be a clear, concise explanation. Hopefully, get it through your head. There you go. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you guys for listening. I'm out. One more thing I kind of forgot to mention. That whole process that they do, the money creation, create the money, give it to somebody, they buy resource, inflate it to oblivion until they only have to trade a little bit of resource to pay it all back, and then basically discard the currency. Once they discard a currency, once it's basically worthless, it's paper, useless, they'll just create another currency with it, and they can basically, prop it up, give it a certain value. They'll just do the exact same thing over and over again. That's what they do, dude. Over and over. Constantly rob people of their resource, which really matters. They keep creating currency, trading for. They're just robbing people, dude. It's a scam, dude. The whole thing's a scam. People gotta understand this stuff. So there you go. That's all I say. I'm out.